Mike Turner. Congressman, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks very much for being here. Your reaction to what we're seeing out of this administration on the spending and tax plans?
Well, Maria, as you were just saying, that the inflationary impacts of the out-of-control spending from the Biden administration are certainly going to be felt throughout the economy. I'm not pessimistic because the president talks a good game. He talks of unity. He talks of bipartisanship, and then he rams through incredibly partisan, highly inflated bills. If you look at just his infrastructure proposal, less than 10% was actually for roads, bridges, and airports and highways, the types of things that people think of as infrastructure. We certainly need an infrastructure bill, and we certainly need to invest. But this overinflated spending by the Biden administration, where, of course, they're using this as an excuse to try to raise taxes, is certainly bad for the economy, and it certainly isn't bipartisanship.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to me because the numbers keep showing us exactly what you're saying. I mean, look at the jobs numbers last week. And now you've got a total of 16 states, Congressman, eliminating federal extended unemployment benefits. South Carolina, Montana, Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, North Dakota, Tennessee, Iowa, Missouri, Idaho. The list goes on. It's a total of 16 states. They're taking this into their own hands. What do you say about that and the impact on the jobs numbers that we saw last Friday of all of this money being thrown around?
Absolutely. Maria, it's very important that we stop the increased spending for unemployment benefits. All of us here on Capitol Hill are hearing from employer after employer that they cannot get people to come back to work. Even offers that they've been giving to people who are on unemployment who say, I'm making too much on unemployment, I can't afford to go back to work. Work is where we need economic growth. Work is where we need people to be. People need to get back and take these jobs. By paying them more on money that we're borrowing than they can get by entering the labor force delays our economic recovery.
I know we're going to hear from the president on his budget soon, over the next week, we imagine. What do you think are the priorities right now when you look at something like defense spending? I mean, we're not seeing any increase there, and yet we are proposing throwing $2.25 trillion at the economy in other places. But, you know, no increases funding the police, no increases in funding the Defense Department, even as we see the threats around us rising in terms of our adversaries.
Well, Maria, you just couched it right. If you look at what's happening with China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, the increased threats to the United States and to our allies are obvious. They're real. They're modernizing their militaries. They're also becoming more adventuresome. We're seeing conflicts that are arising as a result of their military actions. And at the same time, the Biden administration is not investing in modernizing our military. They're cutting military spending at the same time that they're out of control spending everywhere else. It certainly shows that national security is on the back burner, just as border security is on the back burner. This is an administration that's going to leave us less safe.
I mean, it's pretty extraordinary as we see this take place in front of our eyes. The president wants to get the United States back into the Iran deal. Mike Pompeo just told us the other day that al-Qaeda is now based in Iran. And look what has taken place in the last week. The violence in the Middle East. The Pentagon evacuating more than 100 military personnel from the region as Israeli troops prepare for a possible ground invasion. Gaza and Israel exchanging hundreds of rocket strikes as the death toll rises. More than 100 people have been killed, Congressman. We are going back to the Obama days with the Middle Eastern upset. I mean, under the Trump administration, we had 5 countries announce they were normalizing relations with Israel. Do you think the so-called Abraham Accords are now in jeopardy because of the Biden administration wanting to put the U.S. back into the Iran deal?
Well, I think the Abraham Accords certainly are put way back as a priority, and they're certainly going to be neglected by this administration. You know, what we saw with the Biden administration, which we're seeing what we saw with the Obama administration that we're seeing with the Biden administration, is really emboldening our adversaries and weakening our allies. You know, this president when thousands of rockets were going into Israel, did not condemn the violence, but when Israel begins to respond, suddenly the White House recognizes that there's a conflict. We need to stand with Israel. We need to understand certainly that as a democracy and as our ally, they need us not to embolden the adversaries in their neighborhood. The fact that they're re-engaging Iran, especially after everything that Iran has been doing in the area to threaten the shipping routes, to threaten our allies, is certainly, I think, emboldening Iran and will make certainly Israel less safe also.
Why are they doing this, Congressman? I mean, I'm trying to identify a policy that's actually been positive for the American people. What's driving these decisions?
Right. Well, it certainly is. They're upside down priorities. They actually believe that if they kowtow to our adversaries, that they will dissuade our allies. The reality is that they'll dissuade our adversaries. What we need to do is deter our adversaries, and by them trying to bring adversaries to the table, by cozying up to them, they just make their adventuresomeness, their actions in the area stronger, and certainly make our allies question whether or not the United States is going to be there for them. It destabilizes an entire area with the way that they turn upside down our priorities and our relationships.
I mean, it's a similar situation at the border, right? Kamala Harris wants to send $310 million to the Central American countries as an incentive to have their people not come here. How does that work?
Right, and as we see, the Trump administration wall has been stopped, which of course is the signal that the border will be open. The Biden administration's actions have caused a border crisis as we see people entering the country in unprecedented numbers, and then now to engage the nations in Central America and assume that you can pay them off and maybe lessen the flow when they're encouraging the flow. The Biden administration is encouraging people to come here. Certainly, this is going to be money that is not going to be well spent, and at the same time, it's not going to solve the problem at the border. Making certain that the border is controlled, that makes the difference.
Yep. Somebody told me when I was at the border that any money going through there is just going to end up in the hands of the Mexican cartels, the criminal cartels who are sending 2,000 people a day into Texas. Congressman, I know you've been on this for a long time. We'll continue to talk about it and certainly put a spotlight on it. It's always a pleasure to see you, sir. Thank you.
Great.
Congressman Mike Turner joining us in D.C. We'll be right back. Stay with us.